Gula Dewa Dana Yeti Yalak Nelona Dogetsu Deeti no Valadone Aguego Skana Agahak Negalu Yage Lonu Ayo Ya Wehana Yo Wea Hey Yo Hayo Hayo Wea Hana Yo Wea Hey Hayo Hayo Wea Hana Yo Hayo Wea Yo Wea Hana Yo Wea Hey. Let's put our minds together as one and remember the ones who passed on to the sky world. Their life duties are complete, they are living peacefully in the sky world. In the sky world. Ayo-ya. Wehana yo wea hey yo hayo hayo wea hana yo wea hey hayo hayo wea hana yo hayo wea yo wea hana yo wea hey.
Go ahead and read it out loud.
There's DOT.
Or DDT it says.
Yeah, it's DDT.
Is it DDT?
It looks like DDT.
DDT 17E. USS.
USS with the stamp.
That's federal government.
Then it's got, I think, 18 or 16.
1855.
I can't tell the rest. It's not really. There's some more.
Dude, that's an old barrel. It's not oil.
No, something else. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I'm not seeing anything else.
Careful how you're touching it too. Huh?
There's green on it.
It's green?
Yeah.
Did you see anything else on top? The big letters, what do they say? The STD or STC, right?
STC.
What the hell does that mean?
But this barrel was green before.
It was a green barrel?
Yeah, you can tell by that.
Oh, I see it. Oh, you know what? That's the same color paint as those other barrels over there.
Oh, yeah.
What's the USS though? United States.
It's a stamp, like their brand. See? It's like USS.
Well, have them check into the
archives.
Yeah, the stamps.
Every day for a decade in the 1960s, a plane would fly over the San Carlos Apache Reservation and spray the land below with a chemical cocktail.
It was a federal program that aimed to wipe out thirsty vegetation along the Gila River to preserve water for the growing city of Phoenix, 90 miles to the southeast.
Now, more than 50 years later, the Environmental Protection Agency has investigators on the ground on the reservation to find out if there are any lingering effects on the Apache people. This story was uncovered by Nigel Duara, who covers the Southwest for the LA Times. The show's Lauren Gilger spoke with him more about this. And Lauren, did the Apaches know what was being sprayed on them at the time?
They didn't. The tribe's government actually signed off on the program and only sent a statement to Duara when he reached out to them to comment for the story. But yes, at the time, all this time, the Apache people were given no answers. No one told them what this chemical compound was or why it was being sprayed. And it turns out it was called Silvex, and it has components similar to Agent Orange, which has been accused of causing serious health problems for soldiers in Vietnam and in other areas around the country.
So have they seen actual serious health problems because of this?
Some think so. So Duara tells the story through Mike Stevens, who was a kid when the spraying was happening. His wife's family lived right on the riverbank where this spraying was most focused, and all of them have since died of various cancers or other diseases. So he wants answers. But Duara said to understand the effect this may have on the reservation today, you have to understand the reservation as it was back then.
Okay, look right at me. Look right at me.
When her son Gavin started to become ill, it was subtle. So subtle, Leanne Waters wouldn't have been blamed for missing it.
Okay, look right at me. Keep your head straight. How about over here? How many fingers?
One.
Okay, good job. Look up. Look down. Do you have any? Do your fingers feel numb at all?
But one day she looked at Gavin, and then looked at his twin brother Garrett side by side. The difference was staggering.
The size he is right now is pretty much the size he was last February 5th of 2015.
So almost a year ago.
Almost a year ago, yes.
How much does he weigh versus his twin?
He's 35.8 pounds and his twin is 53 pounds.
For months they had been drinking the same water, but Gavin was showing the effects of being poisoned by lead. And such is the nature of lead poisoning. It can affect people very differently, even twins.
Do you remember what the number was?
6.5.
What is normal?
Nothing. There's no safe exposure to lead.
It's a mantra repeated by doctors all over the world. No lead, not even a little bit, is acceptable because we know more than ever what it does to the body. When lead is ingested or inhaled, no organ in the body is spared. Lead even attacks the DNA, affecting not just you, but your future children. All of it essentially irreversible. Equally frustrating, the symptoms could show up now or years from now.
Wait, watch, and see. How do you live your life like that?
Right. It's upsetting.
He's 4.
The lead was coming from the corroded pipes carrying water. The longer the water was in the pipes, the more hazardous it became.
One of the problems is that the Walters house is one of the furthest away from the treatment facility. It partly explains why the testing here was among the highest, 13,000 parts per billion. To give you some context, 5 parts per billion would be cause for concern. 5,000 parts per billion is associated with toxic waste. This home, 13,000 parts per billion. But of course, it's not just one home. It's an entire community here in Flint. 100,000 people live here. 10%, 10,000 of whom are under the age of 6. And they're the ones who are most at risk.
When pediatricians hear anything about lead, we absolutely freak out.
It wasn't a freak out at first, but doctors in Flint started hearing whispers about elevated lead levels in the water in 2014. So Dr. Mona Hanna-Atisha started looking at lead levels in her young patients. And what she found was shocking.
The percentage of children with lead poisoning doubled in the city of Flint. And in some neighborhoods, it actually tripled.
She sounded the alarm to state officials as loudly as she could, but no one listened. Instead,
we were attacked. So I was called an unfortunate researcher, that I was causing near hysteria, and that the state numbers were not consistent with our findings.
Maybe denial was so easy because of this. Flint, a city surrounded by some of the largest freshwater lakes in the world, was now delivering some of the world's most contaminated water to its citizens.
In October of 2014, General Motors, you say, stopped using the water because it was corroding their parts.
Right.
That seems like a pretty obvious clue.
Yeah, so red flags, like loud alarms should have been going off in people's brains. If it's corroding engine parts, what is it doing to our plumbing that is predominantly lead-based?
Water that could corrode engine parts. Just imagine what it was doing to the body and brain of Gavin Walters.
These kids did nothing wrong. They did nothing wrong except being poor.
In May, Professor Mark Edwards from Virginia Tech and Dr. Mona Hanna-Atisha sounded an alarm about lead in Flint's water.
Governor says, look, you can have anything you want. Anything, Mona.
I want a rewind button to April 2014. That's what I want. Because you can't undo this. You cannot undo this.
If there's ever been a U.S. city in need of a rewind button, it's Flint, Michigan. More than a third of the people here are living in poverty. Life expectancy is 10 to 20 years shorter than the rest of the state. There's not a full-scale grocery store anywhere in sight.
And then we got lead. Like, if you were to think of something to put in a population to keep them down for this generation and generations to come, it would be lead. It's just a loss of words.
But they, Dr. Mona, Leanne, the 100,000 citizens of Flint, have to believe that clean water will return one day soon.
Do you know why people have been putting you on TV lately?
Yeah.
Why?
Because they wanted to put us on TV.
Yeah.
So they can see us.
Because you're handsome.
Yep.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm a little weak. I got a lot of neurological issues. I'm 37. I don't know if you know, my name's Adam Murphy.
A lot of things in the water that shouldn't be there that you guys aren't testing for, sir. A lot of things that you guys are all sitting there with. Yeah, I got questions. I got questions that I can't write down that I would like to ask. And y'all need to answer them and not come up with excuses like y'all right now. Y'all are educated, and I have kids that are sick. I got kids that are sick. My teeth are falling out. My son's legs are hurting. And this is all you guys have to say right now. That's all you guys have to say. You guys have no solutions.
We live in Flint. I have 5 children. My son, Declan, was born with lead in his blood. My dog had a stillborn, but before that, before the water, we had perfect litters, 2 litters, perfect. That puppy came out with missing hair, translucent skin, underdeveloped. I had blood work done, and some of the stuff they found in my blood is copper, 17.3 parts per billion, which is over the range. The range is between 3 and 6, or 3 and 15 parts per billion. I'm way over that. I have seizures and neurological problems with my brain, which I just got back from Henry Ford Hospital and talked to a neurologist, and he's going to be doing some extensive MRIs, and I have to get on some expensive medications that Medicaid doesn't cover. Treatment that Dr. Mona Tisha doesn't talk highly of is chelation therapy. It's the only thing, it's the only hope we have, is to get this stuff that they say is unsafe to treat through chelation. Chelation is used in, oh my gosh. Chelation is used in a very safe manner. Chelation means to grab hold of. It's not going to retoxify your body. That is a lie. Just like the lies that they say these freaking pure filters, these $20 filters, don't work. They weren't rated to filter this stuff right here, blood work. Gadolinium? Come on, what is gadolinium? It's used in MRI machines. It causes cancer. It causes major circulatory problems. I can't control my body temperature. I go outside. When you walk across a piece of cold steel because it's been outside, these heavy metals, they turn cold. So you walk outside in the sun, your body feels like it's on fire. It's because that metal in your body, in your organs, your eyes turn bloodshot. It's because the sun's affecting it, the cold's affecting it. So your body just can't control this. So it tries to adapt, and it can't adapt because of the foreign chemicals, not just lead and copper that they just want to talk about. I'm not worried about lead. I'm worried about chloroform. I'm worried about acetone. I'm worried about all these other chemicals they don't want to talk about for some reason. They're too afraid. They're in denial. Not in America. Not in America. People talk about New York City and their drinking water there. In New York, the EPA tests the New York City water. Well, there's a mile-long list of things they're testing for in New York City. How come they're not doing it here?
And they're finding lead in New York City.
Yes,
schools.
they are, but they're taking care of it. And they're treating their citizens like giving their citizens respect by saying, oh, there's a lead pipe that we missed in your home. You have like 0.1 parts per billion of lead coming out of your pipes. So we got to change those pipes and get them out. That's what we need here. And every month they're testing 1,000 homes. From the 2015 water report detailed water report in New York City that I looked up, they're testing for things that the EPA isn't even requiring to test for. How come they're not doing it here? Why? Because we're poor or uneducated? I was a millwright.
I went to school for 7 years. I worked in the field for 2.5 years, and I can't even take care of myself or my kids. My wife takes care of me. My wife drives me around. I can't even hardly drive places because I get lost. If you're experiencing pain, you're experiencing these symptoms, the state's got a lot of answering to do and a lot more work than what they're doing. And covering it up is not the answer.
Hey everyone, today I wanted to talk about Flint, Michigan. We've received so many questions and requests for a video. A lot of people are asking, how did the scientists fail to find a problem with lead in the water? Well, we've done some digging and we found that there was no failure of science. In fact, no less than 4 teams of scientists had found a problem with corrosions and lead in the water. It was the Department of Environmental Quality in Michigan who blocked those scientists and caused the Flint water crisis. Here's what really happened. Back in 2011, when city officials were considering using the Flint River for its water supply, scientists found that the water was corrosive. It contained high levels of chloride, known to eat away at metals. How did the chloride get there? Well, it wasn't necessarily from manufacturing or illegal runoff, as you might think. It was from salt. Table salt has the chemical structure sodium chloride. When salt dissolves in water, the negative chloride ions are separated from positive metal ions. The free chloride ions make the water corrosive and cause the pipes to leach metal into the water, particularly lead from lead pipes. So how did the salt get into the river in the first place? Simple. The people of Flint live in Michigan, where there's lots of snow, and they were using excessive amounts of salt to de-ice the roads. The salty water ran into the Flint River and was then pumped back into their pipes. Now, everyone knows that salt runoff is a problem for rivers in snowy areas, and everyone knew that the water in the Flint River had a much higher level of chloride than the water they had been getting from the Great Lakes. Back in 2011, researchers advised Flint city officials that in order for the water to be drinkable, they would need to add an anti-corrosive agent. Up until now, Flint had been getting its water from nearby Detroit, and Detroit was using phosphates to prevent the problem in their own pipes. No problem, problem solved. But Flint ignored those scientists and chose not to add the anti-corrosive agent to the water because it would cost $100 a day. In April 2014, the town of Flint switched from using Detroit water to Flint River water. Almost immediately, the harsher waters caused Flint's pipes to release iron that made the water brown, as we've seen in photos of people holding brown water. Now, iron is unpleasant to look at, but it's not that dangerous. By October 2014, General Motors had noticed that the water corroded their car parts and had stopped using it. In February 2015, officials tested the home of Leanne Walters and discovered her water had lead levels of 104 parts per billion. Now, there's no safe level of lead, but the threshold is considered to be 15 parts per billion. So a reading of 104 parts per billion was extremely worrying. The city retested her water later that month and found an even higher number of 397 parts per billion, more than 25 times higher than the recommended threshold. According to the EPA's rules, if lead reaches a level of 15 parts per billion in water, the source of the problem must be identified and corrected. The EPA asked Flint what it was doing to prevent lead from leaching into the drinking water from pipes. Was Flint using phosphates as recommended? The Michigan Department of Environmental Quality responded to say that yes, Flint had an anti-corrosion program. What they didn't admit was that phosphates were not part of that program, essentially lying to the EPA. They told the public of Flint that Leanne's house was an anomaly, but it wasn't. Given the information from General Motors and from Leanne Walters, Michigan Department of Environmental Quality should have and could have begun acting at this point, but it didn't. Instead, it decided to monitor the lead levels. Unsurprisingly, their monitoring found that lead levels were rising, But rather than act, the Department of Environmental Quality lied, telling the public that tests showed the water was safe. Leanne Walters had her 4-year-old son tested for lead poisoning and found a blood lead level of 6.5 micrograms per deciliter, meaning that her son was officially lead poisoned. Now, you probably know lead is not a good thing to have in your body, but its effects are particularly damaging for children. Lead mimics the actions of calcium and interacts with proteins, attacking a child's developing brain and causing a range of neurological and learning disabilities. Frightened for her children and increasingly desperate, Miss Walters started her own independent research, tracking down city reports to prove that Flint was not using any anti-corrosion treatment. She also tracked down a water expert, Miguel Del Toro, who worked at the EPA in Chicago, and she informed him of what was happening in Flint. Del Toro warned Miss Walters that the testing done by the city was purposely deceptive. Flint city representatives had told Miss Walters to pre-flush the water mains by running her water on full for 15 minutes. This clears out much of the lead and sedentary water that's left sitting in the pipes, which means the lead reading will be much lower. Essentially, the city of Flint was trying to fudge the numbers. Del Toro connected Ms. Walters with Mark Edwards, an expert on water quality at Virginia Tech, to have her water independently tested. By June 2015, Del Toro had composed a preliminary report on the lead crisis in Flint, which was leaked to journalists. This was the first time any official had publicly implied that there could be a serious lead problem with Flint's water. But because the report wasn't finalized, the EPA refused to talk about it with the media. In the report, Del Toro raised serious red flags about the lack of corrosion control treatment and also mentioned the practice of pre-flushing before testing, saying there was significant underestimation of lead levels in the drinking water. Again, the Department of Environmental Quality denied the problem and called Del Toro a rogue employee, dismissing his findings. After the reports hit the airwaves, Linda Dykena from Michigan's Department of Health and Human Services reached out to the Department of Environmental Quality for an update on Flint. The Department of Environmental Quality lied and said they had not seen a change in compliance with the lead rule since switching to the Flint River source. Suspicious, the Department of Health and Human Services ran its own data and found that yes, there had been an increase in the number of children with lead poisoning, but they didn't do anything with that information, and the report was never released. Meanwhile, Mark Edwards and the volunteer research team from Virginia Tech retested the Walters home and found that the lead levels in the water had skyrocketed to 13,200 parts per billion, more than twice the amount at which the EPA classifies water as hazardous waste. But the problem wasn't isolated. The researchers found that at least a quarter of the households they tested had levels of lead above the threshold of 15 parts per billion. Edwards later commented, "The extent to which they went to cover this up exposes a new level of arrogance and uncaring that I have never encountered." By August 2015, the EPA had officially asked Flint to start using anti-corrosion treatment in its water. Flint refused, insisting they were not required to by law. By September 2015, Edwards and his team from Virginia Tech went public with their findings and announced that the Flint River's high chloride levels were causing pipes to corrode and leach lead. Again, the State Department of Environmental Quality told the public there was nothing to worry about. It claimed it had tested the water at every home with lead pipes. But it was later discovered that the city had no idea which homes had lead pipes because the data on the city's water lines was stored on 45,000 index cards, some over 100 years old. That same month, Dr. Hannah Atisha, Director of Pediatric Residency Programs at the Medical Center in Flint, announced that lead poisoning in young children had surged since the city switched its water supply. Again, the Department of Environmental Quality claimed that her data was wrong and accused Dr. Hannah Atisha of playing politics. It wasn't until October 19 that Dan Wyant, Director of the State Department of Environmental Quality, admitted that his department had made a mistake. By November, the residents of Flint had filed a class action lawsuit. And by December, the Michigan Governor's Office released its findings on the Flint water crisis and in a scathing task force report blamed Wyant and the Department of Environmental Quality for the problem. Wyant resigned on December 29, 2015. Now, if all of this hasn't made you mad yet, the Flint Water Study has released emails from Michigan's Department of Health and Human Services and Department of Environmental Quality revealing that both state agencies purposely refused to release data to scientific researchers and were instead working full-time to attack the idea that there was any problem with lead poisoning in Flint. Links to all of that information are in the description. But no joke, this is the first email released from his office, and as you can see, the whole email has been redacted, so not much hope of transparency there. As of January 2016, an estimated 6,000 to 12,000 children have been exposed to lead poisoning. The neurological impacts for these children are unknown, but estimates put the cost of their medical treatment at $100 million over the next 10 years. If you'd like to do something to make sure that what happened in Flint never happens again, Phil Phelps, a Democratic member of Michigan's House of Representatives, announced that he's about to release a bill to make it a felony for state officials to intentionally manipulate or falsify information in official reports, punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a $5,000 fine. You can tweet your support for that bill to Michigan's House Democrats at MIHouseDems or to Michigan's House Republicans at MIHouseGOP.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to let Mr. Cartwright go, but Mr. Craig, I'm getting very concerned about your testimony because I want you to remind you that you are sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So let's go over what you just said. And I got to get it right in here because I'm kind of concerned because I don't want the public to not see this for the accurate truth. Mr. Craig, Governor Snyder recently named you as the new head of the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality last month. Your boss, Governor Snyder, and I'm hoping he's watching, by the way, gave this 2016 State of the State address. In his speech, Governor Snyder seemed to take responsibility for the Flint crisis, stating that, and I quote, "The buck stops here with me," and that, quote, "I take full responsibility to fix the problem so that it will never happen again." However, in the same breath, Governor Snyder also tried to blame the city of Flint, as it sounds like you're doing right now, and he said this, and I quote, "This crisis began in the spring of 2013 when the Flint City Council voted 7-1 to buy water from the Karenga-Nandi Water Authority," end of quote. Ms. Craig, do you agree with Governor Snyder's statement?
The question that I responded to, sir, was if they would never have changed their water source, would this issue have happened? And I believe that's a true statement because they were on Detroit Water and Sewer Department water, which was phosphated, and they had a 30-year history. So I apologize if I misrepresented.
No, I'm not finished. Just hold on. I'm not finished. We reviewed the resolution passed by the City Council and the minutes from the meeting. At no point during the meeting did the City Council vote to allow the Flint River to be used for drinking water. Isn't that correct, Ms. Spring?
I haven't reviewed those personally, but that's my understanding.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to introduce into the record a letter we just received yesterday from Sheldon A. Neely, who served on the City Council from 2005 to 2014. He was actually there. He was there, Mr. Craig, all right? In his letter, Mr. Neely explains that the City Council did not. Do we have the letter? Where's the letter? You got it? Where's the letter? Oh, they have it. In his letter, Mr. Neely explains that the City Council did not make the decision to use the Flint River because, quote, "The Flint City Council had no power to actually enact any laws for the community. Everything went through the emergency manager," end of quote, who was appointed by the governor. He also says this, and I quote. Did you need something, Mr. Chairman? No. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Would you please?
We'll enter the record without objections to order.
You're making me nervous if with your finger in there. This is what he said. "It was the emergency manager, Ed Kurtz, who made the decision to use the Flint River as a primary source of drinking water for the city of Flint." Mr. Craig, are you aware of Mr. Kurtz's actions?
No, sir. I was not in the seat at the time.
And Mr. Craig, so Mr. Neely also wrote that, quote, Governor Snyder's account of the events leading to this water crisis are completely wrong, end of quote. Why would Governor Snyder try to blame the city council for this decision when it was his own appointee who made it, and you have a city council that has no authority? There's something wrong with that. That's why I interjected here, because I want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Now, let me ask you, I'm not finished. Do you have any reason to believe that Mr. Neely is not telling the truth?
I have no reason to believe.
Now, Mr. Neely's letter is supported by statements from Flint's former mayor, Dane Walling. On January 22nd, 2016, he stated, and I quote, after City Council and I expressed support for a new water supply from Lake Huron, the emergency manager, Edward Kurtz, went behind closed doors with the Department of Environmental Quality and decided to use the Flint River as an interim source, made the budget changes, and put that in place, end of quote. Were you aware of Mayor Walling's statement?
I am not.
All right. Based on the evidence, it seems that Governor Snyder was trying to blame the city of Flint for actions of his own appointee. And he did this in his State of the State address to the entire population of Flint. Now, let me ask you something else. Are the people paying right now in Flint for water they cannot wash in and cannot use and cannot drink? Are they paying water bills? And is it a part of the recovery? You said you want to make them whole. Is that part of it? Why would they be paying for water that they cannot even use, that is poisoning them? That's not American. As Mr. Chairman said, this is not a third world country. Are they paying those bills? Are you going to relieve them of that?
Everyone deserves safe drinking water, and that's the expectation. And yesterday, the governor introduced a supplemental for $30 million to help with that issue. The number one issue, as we've spoken with the mayor, is to make sure the utility remains solvent. And the billing is actually more of a city issue, but we understand and respect that, and everyone deserves water that is safe.
Mr. Chairman, as I close, these are people who are struggling. They're struggling. They've come over here, all the way here from Flint. I don't know how they got here. I guess on a bus. But the fact that they're here. But you know what, Mr. Craig and Mr. Chairman, they're also Americans. They're also Americans, just like you and just like your children. And I don't, and I want to be real clear. And the chairman will bear me out on this. I have said, I don't care whether it's EPA, whether it's local, whether it's state. I want everybody who is responsible for this fiasco to be held accountable. I'm not protecting anybody because that's not our job. We are the last line of defense. And if we don't do it, nobody's going to do it. I yield back.
People of Flint today, as we sit here, can they drink the water?
No, we don't want them to. And that's the terrible tragedy of all this.
Tonight, as the people of Flint wait and wonder if they have been poisoned by the lead in their water, Michigan Governor Rick Snyder admits he failed them and promises to fix the crisis.
All medical experts agree no level of lead ingestion by anyone, especially children under the age of 6, is okay. So
that's correct.
You said last week over 100 children here in Flint have high levels of lead in their blood. How many kids is it as we sit here today?
It's about 100 and some if you go back over the last couple of years.
You're saying there's 100 children as of now. There may be many more.
There could be many more, and we're assuming that.
That it can mean a decline in a child's IQ forever, affect their behavior. It's linked to criminality, and it has multi-generational impacts. It can be passed on. Talk directly to the parents of Flint right now who have a child that is going to live with this.
Yeah, this is awful. And again, our goal is to do whatever possible to minimize the damage, to help support them through that. This shouldn't have happened. Again, this is where there was a failure in government in terms of people not using common sense enough to prevent this from happening and identifying it soon enough.
A local pediatrician, one of the first to discover the lead in the water here, calls the impact on the children irreversible and multi-generational.
For those parents that are sitting here today and wondering, is my kid going to not reach their potential because of this? And that's going to happen to some of these kids. We know that. Dr. Monahana Atisha told me that what can be done is that you can minimize the impact through early literature programs, universal preschool, access to healthy food, so say the calcium binds instead of the lead to the child's bones, etc., mental health services. She put a price tag on that, Governor, and she told me it's going to cost $100 million just to do that. Will you make sure they get $100 million?
I'm not sure she would know how to put the price tag. I have reviewed recommendations she's made. And actually, a number of those actions we were already working on doing in Flint.
She's done the analysis. I'm asking you again, $100 million. Will you make sure they get that if that's what they need?
Well, we're making sure they get what they need.
A 2011 study found water from the Flint River would have to be treated with an anti-corrosive agent to be safe to drink. To do that would have only cost $100 a day, but that was never done.
I was speaking with a young man this morning, and he said to me, they put money over people. And he said, the black lives and the poor white lives weren't worth it. When you look at the numbers, $100 a day, what happened?
Well, that's the failure point. I mean, in terms of cost structures, $100 a day, this is where the huge error was, is there were people that were subject matter experts in this that didn't believe that needed to be done. That was a huge mistake. That was part of the fundamental mistake of this whole situation.
Didn't need to be done. Why?
Well, again,
that money
in terms
was
of, no,
given
not on that point.
Priority here over these
Not at
people?
all. This is where the investigations will follow up, and all those, in terms of the details of all that. And we're cooperating with all those investigations because I want to find out what went on. I want the facts out there.
The kids were being poisoned by the water they were drinking here. The EPA knew about it. Your spokesman, your former spokesman, knew about it in July 2015 and sent an email about it. And you didn't declare a state of emergency until January of this year. Why did it take so long?
Actually, I learned about it in October, and I took action immediately then, offering filters, working with people on getting water, on doing water testing. Again, we needed to do more though. So as soon as I learned about it, we took dramatic action. The failure is people kept on...
Was it dramatic action? Because the mother this morning said to me, no one came to my house immediately back in October and knocked on the door.
No, that's why I said we needed to do more. And so at this point in time, all the other efforts weren't as much as I would have liked. And so the point is, now that was the point of calling the National Guard out, about making attempts to visit every home in Flint.
Why not just immediately replace all of the lead pipes?
That's a question you can ask across the country, and the challenge of that is that's not a short-term project.
Flint has had people poisoned.
That is not a short-term project. In terms of ripping up all the infrastructure, replacing all that, that can take an extended period of time.
Your former spokesman wrote an email back in July of 2015. Here's part of it. I'm frustrated by the water issue in Flint. These folks are scared and worried about health impacts, and they are basically getting blown off by us. You have said since then that you knew about that email and that you were made aware of that. Why not act then?
The experts came back from both the Department of Environmental Quality and Health and Human Services to say they didn't see a problem with lead in the water or lead in the blood.
The folks here did. Well, they were getting rashes. Their kids were having rashes. The water was discolored.
If you could let me finish, Poppy. I mean, that makes you feel terrible. I mean, I wish you would have done something different.
As the scope of the crisis has grown, residents have rallied, demanding the governor step down.
A number of the residents that I've spoken with in Flint have said ultimately they want accountability. Governor, will you resign?
No. Again, I think it's normal. The right action is if you have a problem that happened from people that you were responsible for, you go solve it.
The Michigan governor apologizes to residents affected by the ongoing water crisis. Governor Rick Snyder said on January 20th he would make his emails regarding Flint public for the sake of transparency. In his State of the State address, Governor Snyder said, quote, "Your families face a crisis you did not create and vowed to fix the problem. President Obama declared a federal emergency in Flint and gave $5 million in aid. Flint switched water sources in 2014 to save money, exposing nearly 100,000 residents, including kids, to potentially dangerous levels of lead. The CDC says no amount of lead is safe for children, and the neurological effects are thought to be irreversible. Critics, including the Environmental Protection Agency, say the state didn't respond quickly enough to the water crisis. Bottled water is being handed out until a new water pipeline is finished sometime this year. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Christelle Coumoy.
just want to share with you this latest aquaponics product. It is just fantastic. I'm so excited by it. A friend of mine has spent a long time designing this up, and it's just got all the elements of a wonderful aquaponics system. It's called an aquaponicals, and that's the trade name of it. It's really great. If you just look with me, we've got at the bottom here, we've got the sump, which houses the little tiny pump that works there and pumps the water up through a very cleverly designed channel through the middle of the tank here, and then it comes out at the top. You can see it there. The auto siphon is built in. We've got the cutest little auto siphon that actually works.
Hi, I'm Gina Cavallero. I'm with Green Acre Aquaponics. I'm here at the Aquaponics Source, and I am just crazy about this little system called the Aquaponicals. We like to do things on a really big scale because we're commercial farmers, but they've managed to take this down to a nice compact little system with lots of grow space. Look at this. It's a little flood and drain media-based system. We get a lot of different types of plants we can grow in here, and compared to other small systems on the market, I think we get 10 times the grow space.
Hi, my name is Sylvia Bernstein, and I'm the president of the Aquaponics Source. And we are really excited to be able to bring to you the Aquaponical. This little miniature aquaponics system is great for people who don't have the space for huge aquaponics systems, but they want to bring the fascinating ecology of an aquaponics system into their home. It's a terrific tool for schools to teach this kind of thing. It's also great for kids. They can get up close and personal and watch ecology just come to life. Also, this is going to be a great addition to any home that's looking at growing some of their own food, especially herbs, and having living plants and fish all there right in your home environment.
Welcome to another episode of Stems and Scales. I'm Jeremy Schechter, the Aquaponics Manager out here at Farm Tech in Dyersville, and we're going to give you a sneak peek of our commercial aquaponics system today. So the system actually consists of two parts. We have our nursery part, which you can see over here, and then we have our grow out section that's over here. We start all of our fish out in the nursery system, and when they get big enough, we move them into the grow out system. What that does, it allows for continuous production of fish. The nursery system actually consists of 3 different tanks. The fish start off in the fry tank, which is this small square tank here. So we'll get them at about a half a gram a piece, throw them in here, and they'll be there for about 6 weeks. At the end of those 6 weeks, we take those fish out and bring them to our fingerling tanks. And they'll stay here for about 12 weeks. Doing that lets us bring in fish every 6 weeks, so we can continually bring fish in and also later on harvest fish constantly. The fry tank here is about 55 gallons, and each fingerling tank's 250 gallons, each of which can hold between 400 and 500 fish apiece. Behind me is our bubble wash bead filter that comes with each of these systems. What this is going to do is going to remove all those solid waste that your fish produce, so you have clean water going out to your grow beds. So here's our grow out system consisting of 4 1,200 gallon tanks, each of which can hold between 400 and 500 fish, and each tank utilizes an external standpipe design which keeps the water level constant so it can't drain out, and it also separates each tank from each other. And from here, the water will drain to a drum filter that removes all the solid waste. The water is going to flow from your fish tanks into this micro screen drum filter. This drum filter has a 16 micron mesh, so it's going to remove just about all the solids, even the tiny, tiny little particles. What that's going to do is it's going to really make your water nice and clear and ready for biofiltration. The water flows from the drum filter to the biofilter. Now the biofilter is packed with this media that has high surface area for bacteria to grow on to take the ammonia produced by the fish, convert it to nitrites and then to nitrates. That way the water is safe for the fish and it's nutrient rich for the plants. After the solids have been removed from the water and the ammonia is successfully converted to nitrites and then nitrates, it can freely flow out to the grow beds. But first it's got to stop at this sump, which is a really, really great place for you to add things like acids or bases or do your water tests, things like that. Then it can flow right out to the rafts as nutrient-rich water for your plants. So the grow-out system we just saw is designed to supply water to 2 8-foot by 48-foot deep water culture rafts, which are in the greenhouse next door, and they're next to the 4-foot by 48-foot long media bed that the nursery system is designed to supply. Now we just got fish here, so we're not quite ready for plants, But check back for our next video and we'll show you how to grow there. Again, I'm Jeremy, and this was another episode of Stems and Scales. Try aquaponics.
Welcome to Lucky Clay's Fresh, where we raise the freshest fish, vegetables, and herbs in the Piedmont region of North Carolina, not far from Charlotte, Raleigh, and Pinehurst. Our farming method is called aquaponics, which allows us to grow food with less than 10% of the water required for traditional farming and have less impact on the earth. In this symbiotic system, fish provide the nutrients for our plants, and plants purify the water for our fish, while retaining 99% of the water used. Heat is provided to our greenhouse by a wood gasification system, fueled by wood chips from local loggers. We culture fish in our nursery until they're large enough to be moved to smaller tanks in our greenhouse. Once the fish are of adequate length, they move to grow-out tanks, where they'll be harvested at 1 to 2 pounds, depending on customer needs. Thanks to gravity, water from our grow-out tanks flows through a filtration system, which separates fish food and waste from the water. This filtered water enters biofilters that house the most important part of our system, beneficial bacteria, which convert ammonia produced by fish waste into nitrate nitrogen, which provides plant nutrients. Next, nitrogen-rich water enters media beds ideal for fruit-bearing plants with a root structure like tomatoes or squash. These beds include earthworms that process and distribute remaining solids in vegetation. For pest control, we release ladybugs and other predatory insects each month, in addition to using certified organic products. Excess water from the media beds moves through a siphon and into raceways where lettuce, flowers, and herbs grow on floating rafts, while freshwater shrimp thrive underneath. Air stones placed along the way provide fresh air for shrimp and plant roots. Once water reaches the end of the raceways, it recirculates to our grow-out tanks to repeat the cycle. If you're interested in stocking your restaurant with the freshest, locally grown, meticulously raised fish and vegetables, we'd be happy to give you a tour and set up a plan for your business.